Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 11th episode. I can't believe that it's been 11 episodes so far of Scaling in APAC. And for some of you who are joining us for the first time, we're glad to have you join us. And what's this topic and what's this channel all about? Something that myself and Colin, we are very passionate in. We want to empower organizations, we empower founders who are looking to scale in APAC. It's one of the fastest growing regions. Right, and what's being shared, we invite battle-tested founders and operators and managers and people who have real experience, who have succeeded, who has failed, exited business even right here in this region of the world. So when you, someone who's interested to come and expand within APAC, you can confidently bring your innovative ideas to life and thrive so that you learn from the experience of others. So whether you are currently based in Europe, US, or any other part of the world, and you want to succeed over here, please come in and learn from all the established speakers over here. So I'm happy to have my partner in crime back today. I'm missing you. You have not been around. So I know you're busy making babies, right? So welcome back, Colin. Yeah, can you introduce a little bit more about yourself?
So, my name is Colin Klein. I've been busy making babies and also flying around Europe and US trying to take their money. Serial entrepreneur, my main business Scaler. We are a consulting firm that works with technology companies that are predominantly Series A and above to help them scale. We've also got a couple of interesting announcements and things that we're working on, as we've recently launched an accelerator in Europe, and we will shortly be launching a fund. So there's a bit going on, but everything that we do, it's all around helping technology companies to grow and to scale, which is why we also decided to collaborate with MediaShock, as we both service the same ecosystem from a completely complementary angle. The same way that you would need go-to-market, recruitment, funding, you're going to need to have a brand, media, content strategy that's actually able to cut through. So on that note, I guess over to you, Ming Song. Tell us a bit about MediaShock.
So MediaShock is a content agency who helps companies in the tech space communicate your complex ideas in a more effective manner, and especially in this part of the world. What works well in the US and what works well in Europe doesn't naturally just translate well in this part of the world, talking to so many different languages as well as culture nuances. So we help you do that. We help you cut through the noise and achieve impact when you decide to grow massively in impact. So how do we do this? We can use various mediums like explainer videos, infographics, multi-language webinars, especially if you want to engage your P2P audience or even P2C audience, so that you engage your partners, you engage your end customers, and you educate them. So we help you localize, we help you have the cultural aspect of things taken care of. Hopefully it will help you increase your odds of success when you decide to increase massively your participation in this part of the world. And with that, my producer is here to remind me that we have our on-demands. We have been doing this for a while, and it has always been live. But right now we are relaunching our videos on demand. Is available both on YouTube as well on Spotify. I think the link will be down below somewhere, right? I don't know where it is, but it's going to be there. Right, so check out the lots of brilliant knowledge that has been shared by previous speakers, where we traditionally only had it on a live stream, but right now it's on demand as well. So in the last episode, we talked about the common pitfalls of scaling in this part of the world and how to avoid them when doing that. So today's topic, we have someone very established in this field as well. He's going to build on that foundation, and he's going to focus on 4 essential steps that you need to take so that you can expand in APAC. So Colin, I heard that Thibaut is one good friend of yours. Share some secret things that we don't know about him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a very big fan of the T-Banger. So I have known Thibaut for about 1.5 years. He's a real man, unlike me, so he plays rugby. Great guy. And we were actually introduced by a really good friend of mine, and actually the lady who kind of got me to do LinkedIn posting to begin with. Lisa Tay, who's a phenomenal entrepreneur. Originally, she's actually from Southeast Asia, but she's lived in Australia most of her life. And she was the one that actually got me into using LinkedIn as a means of being able to cut through. And she introduced me to Thibaut. He's the founder of Reachly, which is effectively a lead gen agency. But they're just awesome, man. Like, Thibaut's got 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. And he's an expert in doing lead generation, but he's also an expert in branding and being able to cut through. So I was actually originally introduced when I was connected to his WhatsApp group, where everyone there is a content creator with over 10,000 followers. So the way that the guy's been able to build a lead gen agency, be able to build communities, cut through, he's just someone who I think for me is the best that I've ever encountered in what he does. So that's why I'm really looking forward for our audience hearing some of the great man's wisdom. So that's how I know him.
Awesome. So I look forward to that. I look forward to listening more about what Thibaut has to share with us. So let's go.
Hi everybody, I'm Thibaut, the founder of Reachly. I've been based out of Bangkok, Thailand for almost the last 10 years of my life. And today we're going to be talking about how to scale in APAC. Right, so first of all, I want to give you a bit of background. I've worked in corporate and a bunch of startups, again, for the last 8-9 years of my life, based out of Bangkok, Thailand. I recently founded Reachly, which is a go-to-market / lead generation clay agency. Been doing that for almost 2 years now. And we help B2B companies, SaaS, cybersecurity companies, consulting companies get more meetings through a bunch of different systems. So we were the first clay expert agency based out of Southeast Asia, the first one based out of Thailand. We organized the first clay event in Bangkok a couple of months ago, and we're looking to kind of do the second edition very soon. We have clients in more than 7 industries and 9 countries, but we had initially a very strong APAC focus. So we've worked with companies in Australia, Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand. And so today we're going to be talking about the specificities of scaling a business within APAC. So why is APAC a blue ocean, right? So the main reason why APAC is really still a blue ocean is when you think about it, LinkedIn is the main platform that we use, is one of the main platforms that we use when you do outreach. But on the flip side of that, it's the main platform that data providers use to scrape and find contact details of business owners, decision makers, and whatnot. I think the main challenge, which is a great opportunity, is that not many people are tapping into LinkedIn in Asia Pacific, as opposed to the way people are doing it in Europe and Middle East, as well as in the US. But it's especially the US is leading that market. In the Europe and Middle East, there's a few less people doing so. If I were to give you guys a couple examples of people that have been super successful at building a personal brand in APAC, off the top of my mind, I could quickly think about a person like Audrey Chia. She's based out of Singapore. She helps people write content with AI that doesn't lose their authenticity and voice. And soul, as a lot of people say. I think she's got about 60,000 followers and she's built a great business. So now what we're going to be talking about is the 4 steps of living and launching your go-to-market system in APAC, right? So what you want to be doing, step number 1, is you want to be able to map your entire total addressable market. Very important. So if you're an APAC company and you want to expand regionally, you want to understand, I mean, you probably already know that, obviously, your industries, but within those industries and those countries, what are the technographics and the firmographics, as a lot of people call it, pretty much the details like employee size, location, and all that about the companies that would be a good fit for you. Once you define those criteria, what you want to be doing is for each of those countries, you want to find the best database to scrape details about those companies, right? Because you will find different directories in Australia than you would find in Singapore, than you'd find in Thailand, and you also find different databases that have good data. So then what you want to be doing is you want to be tiering your markets, right? In terms of annual contract value and potential deal size that you'll be going from those companies, whether that's on a country level, right? Where you want to be looking at the emerging markets versus, the already established markets. Or that's on the company side level, right? You could also just say, I'm going to take everyone within APAC and say, which are the tier one companies because they have, let's say more than 1,000 employees, or because they just fundraise, or because X, Y, and Z, which are the tier two, which are the tier three. And it's very, very important to actually tier your companies, because when you build an outbound campaign, whether you do it manually or automated, by the way, you should always start by the bottom tier, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to want to refine your messaging and your approach and your offer and your lead magnets and whatever you're using to drive conversations. And it's best if you do that with tier three companies rather than tier one, because if you lose a tier three deal, it's much less impactful than if you actually lost a tier one potential deal. You also potentially want to take into account decision-making pattern, right? Depending across all of those countries. So that like in Japan, Korea, there's multiple stakeholders. The buying committee is very big. Thailand is a little bit of the same, but Thailand and Indonesia most likely is going to be the C-level is going to be making the final decision, and if he doesn't want it, it doesn't go. So just giving you some examples on the best platforms in order for you to find those. What I highly recommend everyone to use. And so we're talking about the time mapping, right? 4 steps to GTM system and to launching your campaign and scaling in APAC. At the center of everything we do is Clay. For a lot of different reasons, but the main reason is because, especially when you do things at scales, if you're doing things manually, you could literally use Google Sheet and it will work really fine, right? But if you're really doing things at scale, you want to start using platforms like Clay that allows you to enrich and score companies automatically at scale. Meaning if you have 5,000 companies in your TAM or 10,000 companies in your TAM, you actually can check for every single one of those companies, are they running ads? What was their web traffic this year? You can really do pretty much anything you think of, but the beauty of Clay is it allows you to do it for every single company individually at scale, right? So that's why we use Clay. We're a Clay partner, obviously. If you want 3,000 free Clay credits, you can just message me. I'll give you a link where you can get that straight away. So that's really what I recommend you to use. Even if you just use the 3,000 free credit, that might be enough if you're doing things manually. And if you want to do things at scale, you probably need a bit more than that. Now let's move into LinkedIn optimization. And very often people tell me, hey, Thibaut, I don't get it. Why are you talking about LinkedIn optimization when we're doing cold emails together? And people are just going to see my email. I was like, yes, that's correct. They're going to see your email. And if they receive from you an email and not a LinkedIn DM, because we do multi-channel, why would you care about LinkedIn? The reason is very simple. The main thing that most people do once they receive a cold email is they're going to Google your name, your company. And LinkedIn ranks really well for SEO. So you're likely going to appear top 1, top 2, unless you have a lot of other people that have the same name as you. You're likely going to appear in the top of the Google page. So once they actually land onto your LinkedIn profile, that's why having an optimized LinkedIn profile is very important. And I always say this to my clients. We live in a world where attention span's gone down massively. People, are too used to scrolling TikTok and all that stuff that they're not really used to spending 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds anymore on something. So once they get to your LinkedIn profile, remember they don't know you. They just receive a cold email from you. Once they get to your LinkedIn profile, you want it to be crystal clear and for them to understand within 3 seconds who you are, what you do, and why they should care. Because if they don't get that, they're likely going to close that page, delete that email, and say, yeah, forget about it. Or maybe the offer wasn't good enough. Right? So that's why LinkedIn profile optimization is very important. When you optimize your profile, what do you want to optimize for? I like to start top to bottom, right? So starting on the top, the banner. It's a massive piece of digital real estate. So you want it to be well designed, look professional. Don't do something on your own on Canva, which you think looks cool. Try and get someone to actually design it for you so it looks professional. And that banner should have social proof if you can, ideally USP or your elevator pitch, and then some other cool things about your brand and your branding colors and all that stuff. If your core focus is Singapore companies, or let's say you have 3 markets of focus, but you know that Singapore is 70% of your business, maybe on your banner you should have a Singapore phone number to show that you're a local business and you have a local entity and local phone numbers, etc. People tend to respond to that. Second is your profile picture. You want to be looking at the camera, having a big nice smile. If you don't want to smile, you're too shy to smile, just be normal, but try to look approachable, because again, that's the only thing people will know about you when they get that DM, is they'll see that picture, and that's likely going to influence whether or not they want to reply to the DM. Of course, on top of what that DM contains and what you're offering to them. The third thing is headline, right? So I used to have the formula, I help businesses X do Y and Z type of formula. And then I had I think it was almost 8 months ago, I had Arnaud Belinga from Breakcall on a podcast with me in Bangkok, again, I think about 8 months ago. And he said, oh yeah, no, I do founder at company name as the beginning of my headline. I was like, why do you do that? No one does that. He goes, yeah, because when you comment on people's profile or when you post, the first thing that people see is founder at your company name. And that's massive brand equity. And I was like, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it really helps because, again, it helps push your brand in front of as many people as possible. So great tip, Arnaud. Next one is your about section. You really want to write your about section the way, it's almost like a story. You want to have it be engaging. You don't want to be a third person, massive block of text about who you are and what you do. Make it engaging. Again, if people took all the effort to go all the way to your about section, try and write it in a way that makes them want to stay on it. So even with a free profile, you have the option of having a featured section where you can add links to your profile. I would recommend you to have 2 featured section cards. I know I only have one at the moment. One should probably be a link to a contact us page, and another one should be a bit of a less friction way of getting attention, which is a lead magnet, right? So clicking into a lead magnet for them to get a free resource, a free guide, a free course, or anything that could get them into your funnel. The second thing is the logos and any sort of social proof you add on your website, try and have it be as recognizable as possible. So if you've worked with 60 plus brands and you have authorization from all of them to use their logos on your website, you want to make sure to choose the top 5 or the top 4 that you can display on LinkedIn that are going to be the one with the biggest brand awareness in the region. Because again, when people get to your profile, they're like, hey, I've seen this logo, I've seen that logo. And they're like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. And then probably you also want to be mentioning your achievements. You want to be mentioning your regional achievements. So you don't want to say we've helped 50 companies. You can say we've helped 50 APAC companies achieve XYZ, right? So this is it when it comes to LinkedIn profile optimization. If anything is unclear, just message me. More than happy to give you a quick feedback on how your profile looks like. Let's move on to the third point. The third point is your content strategy. So first and foremost, focus on your personal brand. Company page have close to no value. If you post something on a company page that has 3,000 followers versus something on the personal profile that has 3,000 connections, the reach is going to be at least 4 to 5 times bigger on the personal profile. Just because LinkedIn is trying to push for personal branding and people to have their personal brand, and they put less importance on LinkedIn company page. So that's very important. The second thing is, and that's a bit of a challenge, depending on how narrow is your region and in APAC and which country you're focused on, time zone, right? You want to be looking at which time is the most optimal time for you to post on LinkedIn to make sure that you hit people that are in Australia and it's not already lunchtime for them, and in Singapore, and you can also potentially hit people in Thailand, and it's not too early for these guys. Another thing that I find very, very strong on LinkedIn and that I've been doing a lot is you want to be collaborating, right? So what does that actually mean? That means you want to be creating content with other people who speak to the exact same audience as you, but they don't offer the same services as you, right? So they're not actually competitors of you, not at all, but they speak to the same ICP. And the beauty in this is they will benefit from it because the exposure they'll get from your content is going to be seen by your clients and your network, and they might actually reach out to them, and the other way around is true as well. So we've talked about content strategy, right? What does that exactly mean, and what type of contents are there? So there's 3 types of content. There's what they call tofu, mofu, and bofu, right? I know they sound funny, they're just acronyms. Tofu just means top of funnel. So brand awareness content, industry insights, cheat sheets, listicles. It could also be life story. even though I prefer to include personal stories within those three type of contents and not just have personal story be its own type of content. Middle funnel will be more like educational, know-how, guides. Again, it could be listicles and examples of tools that you're using and all that. You want to be showing your expertise and growing your authority in the space. And then finally, BOFU, bottom of funnel. Those are case studies, testimonials, and things like this. And you don't want to be overdoing it because people get kind of bored of it. You need to have a great spread in terms of type of business. If you're into the early days of your business, you should focus on TOFU and MOFU, at least for 2-3 months, to grow traffic, to grow engagement, and then slowly move into bottom of funnel. In terms of a language strategy, I think it really depends on the country that you're going after. Obviously, if you look at countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, even Thailand, I would suggest an English first approach because that's what most people doing business are going to be using. And then if you start looking at other countries like Japan, Korea, Vietnam, maybe Indonesia as well, you might need to have local language. Now that we've talked about the different content strategy, let's talk about the different type of content and creatives that you can be using, right? So you could potentially be using images, you could be using carousels, you could be using videos, and you can be using post, like text. Don't use polls, they don't really do so well. Out of those four, I honestly think that they all do well, but you again need to have a strategy where you're splitting it. You don't want to just do carousel or just do video and everything. You need to test it because it all depends at the end of the day about your audience. Right, so this was everything about content strategy. Now let's move into the final part of this masterclass. It's launching your outbound at scale, right? So the challenge you're going to be having again is communications styles and ways of doing business in the region really depends. So one thing that you might want to be looking at is don't treat every country the same. Again, I think it's very important in APAC that you cater your sequences and your campaigns in different ways depending on the seniority of the people you're going after, as well as the country that you're going after. And you could potentially segment it even further by looking at industries. Because people in the finance and legal industry, they're going to be much more traditional in their business approach, as opposed to people in the startup environment and SaaS industries. Now, on the back of that, there's two main channels you want to be using when you're doing your outbound: LinkedIn and email. Again, I would highly recommend you to do both. But if you had to choose certain country to focus on with a specific channel, probably you would want to be looking at Australia or Thailand for LinkedIn, because they do pretty well. And then emails, you could probably do Singapore and Indonesia. That's what we found that works best. But there's no one answer fits all. It really depends on you, who you're going after, your industries, and all that. Now, I was mentioning earlier in the very first part of this 4-step process, the enrichment, right? So we've enriched companies and we know whether or not they're running ads, whether or not they've been growing, if they've raised funding in the last year, if they hired more than 3 people. Whatever enrichment we think of, all is possible. You could, again, either do it manually or you could do it automated through Clay. Another thing that we can do, so those are what we call signal enrichments, right? Because it's a signal that the company is doing well. If they've hired X, or if they grew 30% year on year, or if the similar web traffic is down 50% year on year, those are signals that something is happening. On the flip side of that, because now we're talking about outbound, we're going to mention those signals maybe, or we're going to be saying because they have those signals, we're then going to be reaching out to them with that offer. That's the way we approach things. So the other type of signals is going to be signal triggers, right? So the moment something happens, we're going to be reaching out to them, right? So let's say they've raised a pre-seed round. The moment that happens and there is news about it, or some of the platforms will monitor and scrape on a daily basis, trigger that signal, that's why it's called a signal trigger, we're going to be reaching out to them. Hey, John, congrats on the fundraise. That probably means that now XYZ is a pain point. We have Y as a solution. Love to have a chat. Or here's a resource we put together for you. I would love to give that to you. Right? So those triggers, again, it really depends on what you sell and who you sell it to, but there's a very, very big list of them. All right. Last but not least is your GTM tech stack. When it comes to launching your outbound campaigns, but again, it's going to heavily depend on what we talked about, who you're targeting, the country, the seniority, and everything, as well as whether you're going to be doing this manually or automated, right? So if it's manual, this doesn't apply so much. But if you're going to automate this, here are the main things that you're going to need to do. So first is your infrastructure. You're going to need to have a proper infrastructure for your cold emailing domains. So what that looks like is you want to buy subdomains. Never send cold emails for your main domain because you might hurt the deliverability. So you want to buy subdomains and you want to set them up on a platform like Zapmail. Again, we're a Zapmail partner. If you need any help with that, reach out to me. More than happy to give you a link and a guide on how to get set up on there. The second thing is you want to think about your offer, right? Because there's only 4 parameters to a successful outbound campaign. The first one is the infrastructure. The second one is, let's even talk about that before offer, is the data. You want to make sure that whoever you have in your list of companies and the people that are working at those companies have been double verified. You've run like a one-to-one check to make sure that they still work in those companies, because a lot of the time, if you scrape Apollo and you scrape other platform, they'll tell you, yes, this guy is the CMO of this company, but it's actually not that anymore because it's changed job or the platform was updated and not up to date. So it's very important that you double verify any email you're about to send to not hit, the spam folder or get higher bounce on your email. That's one. And the second thing is you want to run a one-to-one check whether or not that person is still working in that company, right? So that's on the data side of things. And I feel like on the flip side of the data, you can also talk about the triggers we just talked about. It's like how relevant your data is, but we've already just talked about that. So now the third thing is going to be your offer. What does your offer look like? I always tell my clients and the people I just have calls with discovery calls with, is that not everything is going to sell the same, right? Not everything is also easy to sell through cold outreach campaigns, because it's cold outreach. These people don't know you, they don't know your brand, they've never heard about you before. So if you approach them and say, hey, I have this $100,000 software, would you like to buy it? There's a very few chances that they actually say yes to. But if you say something like, hey, we have this software used by company A, B, and C, and it's going to help you save on Y, and here's a 3-week free trial, no strings attached, that's probably going to be doing better, right? So you really want to be thinking about what is going to be your offer for your campaign that remove as much friction as possible to increase the chance of conversion, right? So third is the offer, and last is the messaging. But again, the messaging to me is kind of linked to the offer. So it's more 3 than 4. It's very important. Actually, let's start with the messaging. It's very, very important that you don't talk about you, yourself, and your company. People don't have time for that. It's cold outreach. They don't know you. And frankly speaking, they don't care. It's important for you to mention what pain points does your product and service actually solves. How can that actually help them fix any problem which they have, right? This is what matters. So I recommend you to talk about their pain points and all of that, which again, you're likely will know from the triggers, right? If they've just raised funding, they're probably after aggressive growth. If they're after aggressive growth, that means that they're training, and you can trickle down into the potential pain point that they will have. And that's why the messaging is very important. On the flip side of that, you want to keep it short, very short. No one has time to read like a 300-word essay in an email. There's actually a bunch of GTM specialists that are doing it the other way around when they write very long email. I'm pretty sure it works. But I think long story short, you can A/B test things, but I would highly recommend you to keep your emails under 80 words and make it super straight to the point. I often tell my team, if the meaning of your sentence would be the same if you removed a bunch of words, then remove those words, right? So those will be the main 4 points to running an outbound campaign that works, right? It's your infrastructure, your data, your offer, and your messaging. So we've talked about everything. The last thing to talk about maybe in the outbound is as well as the language. But again, we've already talked about that earlier. Make sure that if you're going into countries that are very localized or businesses that are unlikely to speak English, you want to adapt your outreach to that. So that's that reality cold email. We've already talked about LinkedIn outreach. And the last thing is, if those 2 channels didn't work, keep track of your campaigns. And one of the best channels that still a lot of people are a bit afraid of and underutilizing is your phone, right? If they actually haven't answered your email and answered your LinkedIn DM, just call them. And that actually works. So that's pretty much everything for scaling in APAC. Thank you guys for tuning in into the live. And if you have any questions, feel free to just message me directly on LinkedIn. See you on the next one.
The big dog, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Hey.
You're significantly bigger, taller than what I imagined, but that's okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And I guess thank you also for contributing your time to our audience of scaling in APAC.
Of course.
I know that people would have heard the masterclass, but for those joining late, I guess give us the short synopsis. Who are you? And I guess what is your specialization and why are you an expert in helping companies to scale in APAC?
Sure, thanks for the intro, Colin. So a bit of context about me. I'm Thibaut, I'm the founder of Reachly. I've been based out of Bangkok, Thailand for almost 10 years of my life now. I used to work in a couple of startups who went public, and I've worked in a couple of M&E as well. And I've launched in the last 2+ years, Reachly, which is a go-to-market agency. So we're pretty much a clay agency helping you do lead gen and acquire more meetings and drive your top funnel. So that's pretty much how and why we help companies grow through cold emails, LinkedIn DMs, and cold calling as well.
Fantastic. I love getting the old cold call from you as well.
Yeah.
For the audience that isn't familiar with this, you said that you're a clay agency.
Yeah.
I love clay. One of the hardest tools to use in the world, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
What is a clay agency for those who aren't familiar?
So a clay agency, or a clay agency as they call it, is an agency that is leveraging clay as the core tool of everything, at the center of everything they do, pretty much. So clay is a GTM tool that does mostly 3 things and can help you do 3 things. I mean, it can support is inbound marketing, outbound marketing, and revenue operations. Most of the people are using it for outbound, right? Because it's very strong. It's strong for everything, as long as you know how to use it. Like you said, it's very technical and there's a high barrier of adoption. And it's quite hard to get great at. But most people are using it for outbound. Yeah, so that's what Clay is. It pretty much helps you customize your company and people info in a very detailed way, like one-to-one at scale.
I have to say, it's one of the best sales tools that I've seen. I've used Clay before, and I will be honest, it can feel like learning how to code at times.
Yeah.
That said, what it can actually do is quite phenomenal. If you sort of combine it with natural inspiration from ChatGPT, you can literally go to such a granular level that I'm a software company. I sell cybersecurity software to companies in between 500 to 5,000 people that have got a particular pain point in AI. You can then, if you combine that with ChatGPT, you can literally reverse engineer exactly how you identify who your prospects are, exactly how you identify the pain points that they have, exactly how to identify the specific person it is that you need to target, as well as being able to obtain their email. Then when you sync it with an outreach tool, it doesn't matter how niche or specialized it is what you're doing, Clay can actually completely automate that entire process for you of highly relevant, highly qualified contacts that get pushed directly out for email marketing. It is it's probably the best. I've never seen anything quite like it, but it does have quite a high barrier to adoption, which is why you should use an agency. But outside of Clay, you mentioned that there's 3 things that you do or that Clay does. RevOps is massive in North America, but it's still relatively nascent here. There's probably a lot of people that are listening to this that actually aren't familiar with what RevOps is. Can you tell them what it is?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question. I would say for me, the way I explain RevOps, it's pretty much any operations that support revenue activity, right? But the main way in which people do RevOps is enriching the CRM and keeping a CRM up to date, right? That's one of the main way, right? And so when you talk about Clay for RevOps, what people will tend to do is it's pretty much like a closed loop system where they have their HubSpot or their Salesforce connected to Clay and run on a schedule, which could be daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you choose, to have any information about a contact or a company be updated. And then for each of those 2, no matter the data points that you actually need, you actually will be able to find that within Clay, right? So let's say you wanted to check about, the latest update on that company's website, you can check that. For that company, you want to check who is the latest VP of marketing or marketing manager they just hired, you can check that. Pretty much everything about a company can be found. And on the people side of things, if someone and that's where it gets really powerful, if someone that works at a company that's a client of yours left that company, surely you want him to go and take your product to the next company he's going to be working at, right? So Clay allows you to do that, and you can all connect within HubSpot. And so, yeah, again, like if HubSpot pushes that to Clay, Clay is going to tell you, hey, that guy doesn't work there anymore. That triggers an alert to your AE or your BD guys. Pick up the phone. Hey, John, I saw you guys, you just changed company. Congrats on the new role. I would love to understand what you're going to do there, and if, we could find potential way to collaborate, right? So that's the type of stuff that you could do within RevOps. I think it's not as popular as it would be in the US and in the UK and Europe, just because data is harder to get by in APAC,
Yes.
right?
Okay, look, let's then talk about startups or even companies that are looking at entering into Asia Pacific. So you've worked with a huge amount of tech startups. Why is it that so many of them are absolutely rubbish at making revenue?
Well, I think at least when we talk about the lead gen side of things, because that's really where my expertise and my experience comes from, I think a lot of people just approach it the wrong way. They just want to... Well, first of all, I've seen something that sometimes really shocks me is you talk to people and they're like, here's our ICP, and you're like, but what about those guys? Because I think, your product does this, and maybe you could also say, oh yeah, potentially we could do. I was like, oh, it's like, my idea is like, you want to have like a broad range of ICPs and say, maybe this guy's a decision maker, but there's a buying committee in the company, and there's a product champion. That guy's going to use that product, and there's this guy who is going to be approving the budget. So surely there's more than one ICP. Yes, there's probably one main decision makers, maybe not all the time, but that could be already the first thing. If they get the base wrong of the ICP mapping and all that stuff, there's many chances of them screwing up the rest, pretty much. On the back of that, I think when people do lead gen and they send emails and stuff, they treat it like marketing. It feels like you're mailing someone like a marketing brochure, and they're sending them like a giant paragraph of text, like me, myself, and I, and oh, how wonderful is my company.
I strongly agree with what you're about to say, by the way.
And I tell everyone, it's like, guys, you're not unique. No one's unique. So people don't care about your business, right? They care about the pain points that they have and the solution that your business can actually help them achieve. So I think that's the second thing is when you reach out to people, stop talking about your business, your product and all that. Talk about what you can solve for them. And that already changes a lot of things. That's the second point. I think the third point is, and then I'll shut up for a second, is the goal of lead gen is not to book you a meeting. Don't send people Calendly link. Don't tell them, I would love to speak to you at Thursday. He doesn't know you. That person doesn't know you. He or she doesn't know you. The goal of lead gen is to get a reply. You will never get a meeting if you don't get a reply to your outreach first. So the outreach and everything you write should be catered towards getting and triggering a response. So those will be the main three reasons why people don't do lead gen right.
Yeah, no, I'm going to touch on several of the points that you mentioned, and from personal experience, as someone, I've worked with 48 unicorns and I've worked with a whole bunch of early stage companies. I find that a lot of startups, the messaging is rubbish. Like, they just can't articulate what they do.
Yeah.
And I also am surprised how many startups, specifically the founders, don't realize how important their personal brand is.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when they're early stage.
Yeah.
People don't resonate with the company. People resonate with the person. And you need to know how to become a walking, living branding machine like this guy. In fact, you should check him out on LinkedIn. It's pretty impressive. He tries.
I try.
Yeah. So let's start, first of all, with messaging. And let me give you an example. I met a lady, and I hope she's not watching this, but I met her in London, and I asked her, what does her startup do? And we're revolutionizing geospatial financing and resilient investing and spatial arbitrage. And I'm just like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah. Sorry, Colin, I'm just cutting you here. Just one thing. I 100% agree with you. And to me, I always tell people on this point, again, sorry for cutting you, is even if you ask Elon Musk what the hell does he do, I'll just be like, I'm building rockets that go to Mars.
Yeah.
You don't need to say something over technical. It's like, simplify it. If you can expand your business, then no one's going to be able to buy from you.
That's it. Nobody gives a shit if you're built on the blockchain. Nobody gives a shit if you're agentic AI. All they want to know It's as simple as this. Who do you sell to? What problem do we solve? I think back to that lady, and I'm like, I have no idea what you just said. And I actually know the space. Who do you sell to? She's like, insurance companies. What problem do you solve? We analyze the insurance risk of buildings, so we help to reduce like insurance risk or payouts from natural disasters. But we can also tell how well a building can defend itself from natural disasters like flood barriers or fire sprinklers. I might just say that. That's literally it. And then I met another guy, and it was honestly one of the greatest sales pitches that I've ever heard. He's like, hey, Colin, do you like prawns? I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you want to get sick? I'm like, no. I stop you getting sick. I'm like, okay. How? I've got a testing kit. We test the prawn, 99.9% accurate. I'm like,
So what, before every
That's
time
a pitch.
before you eat a prawn, you have to test it every time?
well, they sell to farms. They sell
Okay.
to like trout farms where they test it. But I'm just like,
Can
that
you imagine
there
getting to the
is
restaurant with
on
your like
point.
prawn testing
Well,
kit?
exactly. But like that there is on point. And what I find is that there's just so many startup founders
Yeah.
that will give you a 5-minute dissertation of their life, and it's on the blockchain in the metaverse where it's like,
I mean,
what do you do?
Elevator pitch exists for a reason, right?
Yes.
Because it's important to be able to define what you do within 15 seconds.
How would you teach a company to do an elevator pitch?
Oh, I have no idea. I think you really have to think about what's your... Well, I think you want to... I always go back to this when I don't know what to talk about, is the who, what, why type of stuff. Like, and I'm like, so who do you sell to and what do you do for them and why is it important, right? So probably like, for example, for Richly, is like we help B2B companies get more meetings and grow the top funnel with best-in-class GTM system using AI, right? So if GTM system is too complicated, I'll probably just say lead gen using AI or like cold email using AI. And that kind of gives you a 2-sentence elevator pitch. I think it's very important to just go back to the basic, right? Again, you don't want to overcomplicate it. Yeah.
What I find works really well, it's even like we do lead gen for tech companies. You don't need to give the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
In fact, you actually want to make it really short because you got to remember, you are the presentation. It's not your slides that are the presentation. You want to give something really, really short, and then the person asks you the question. It's like, okay, how do you do that? What you say, it's meant to prompt the response. How do you do that? So then you can give them the response. But people need to be leaning in and actually asking questions, and that's what I find that a lot of startup founders get wrong. The other one is, you and I both agree about this. So it's branding, it's content, it's authenticity.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen Thibaut's LinkedIn profile, it is very, very, very impressive. But can we have some of your words of wisdom around building personal brands, about posting content, about being authentic, and why it's so extremely important if you actually want to make sales?
So the main reason why it's important to have a personal brand in 2025 is because at the end of the day, people buy from people, right? Everyone's saying this, you've heard everyone talk about it. Colin just mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. I think it's extremely important to have a personal brand. It also, in the world of AI, shows that you're a real person. So when people are like, who am I buying from, they go and check you out, they're like, oh, okay, he's real, he's got a team, he's got people, they do team building, they do this, so he's an expert on that, he's done X, Y, Z. You look legit, right? So that's very important. It helps you build authority, but at the same time, you don't want to just like talk about everything and anything, like, oh, I went to walk my dogs and X, Y, Z. Like, I mean, it's cool to do some personal stories. I encourage people to do so. It's really, I mean, you can do whatever you want with your LinkedIn profile, it's yours, right? Personally, I like to throw in some personal stories within my content strategy, but my content strategy always revolves around my work, what I do, and how I can educate people who I usually speak with, which are CEOs, CMOs, and CCOs, or like CEOs, head of sales, and head of marketing, pretty much. So I want to make sure that my content is around that. I'm educating people, I'm giving value. And very often I hear people say, oh yeah, but Thibaut, if you give so much value to people, they're just gonna take it and do it. No. Cool. I mean, yes and no, but like if they do, then they probably weren't a good fit for you anyway in the first place. And they might also just try and do it and realize, oh, it's a lot more complicated than what I thought it was. And then if they're a good fit, what's likely gonna happen is they're gonna be like, that looks too complicated for me to do or for someone in my team to try and learn. How about I hire this guy instead? Right, so that's really why I think having a personal brand is very important. And anyway, guys, you can't serve everyone. We live in a very crowded planet, and there's a lot of business out there, and this space is growing every month, every quarter, and every year. And I don't think it's going to stop there. So I think you should share value and as much as possible.
So you and I actually got acquainted by a good friend of mine and the person who actually got me to start posting content to begin with. I didn't tell you that I actually learned all of this from Lisa Tay.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
So Lisa Tay is quite phenomenal. So T-E-H, I hope that I'm pronouncing her surname correctly, but Australian entrepreneur. Originally, she's actually from Southeast Asia. She has, I think it's like 48,000 followers on LinkedIn, and she's definitely one of the best people that I've seen in terms of getting a personal brand out there, and she's so well known. But I remember when I was thinking about doing it, because I know that I've seen how businesses get value from it, but I was quite nervous or hesitant about starting. And this is probably going to resonate with a lot of people that are watching this, because a lot of founders have the exact same thing. And what she said to me is like, don't be nervous, just start.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people don't start. That's the problem. It's not about what you post. It's actually about just being consistent, and you learn as you go. But I'd love to hear from your perspective that, I guess, if someone wanted to know, what is the secret behind viral posts or posts that do really, really well? Like, what would you say have been like your 3 learnings that you can share with founders?
To me, I always tell people, likes and comments and all that stuff is good, but it doesn't pay the bill. Seriously, I'd rather have like a piece of content that gets 20 likes and I have 3 people that message me and be like, hey, actually, how did you guys do this for this client? I'm keen to hear a bit more about that. Versus a post where it's me, I don't know, at the beach with my laptop, I don't know, I'm imagining some stuff, and I get 400 likes and crickets. No one messages me. Probably I'll still stick to the post that gets me 20 likes and people actually DMing me.
But let's just say if you're trying to start out, what advice would you give for someone to turn this into a successful lead funnel for their business?
The first one is to have a content strategy, right? So like I said, top funnel, middle funnel for the first 2-3 months, and then you can rotate a bit more in between across the 3 top, middle, and bottom funnel on a specific schedule, right? So depending on how many posts you post per week. Going viral can be good, especially if it's in the early stage of your growth kind of journey and posting on LinkedIn, because that allows you to get more reach again, right? We've talked about it on the masterclass, but you don't want to just be doing lead magnets and viral posts that have no value. Try and do something that's really valuable, so that's what people remember you as. And then probably the second tips I would give is to be consistent.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to have a good content strategy, you want to be consistent, you want to be posting X per day every week at the same time so people know and people remember that, hey, that's when Colin posts Wednesday, let me check what he posted about today, right? And they get used to that. And the third point is value.
Yeah.
If you post non-valuable content, people will really resonate with that. If you post something they're like, oh my God, that's great, actually I was wondering how to do that, great, now you're there.
Yeah.
Now they'll remember you. And if any day they're like, hey, I wonder how to do this. Hey, I know who to reach out to. Let me message Thibaut. And then that's what happens to me all the time now. I get people messaging me and say, hey, I saw your post 5 months ago. Yeah. And then, you were talking about this and that. I'm curious how we have this problem now in the company. I would love for you to understand X, Y, and Z.
Can I ask you a topical question that I actually see right across the world? With generative AI, there are a lot of companies that historically wouldn't have been doing email marketing or wouldn't have been doing content, they're now doing email marketing and doing content. And one thing that I've noticed is that it actually is quite easy to tell if something's been written by AI.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how well you do the ChatGPT prompt or whatever it is you're using, like you can still tell.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies are facing this issue, and I see this right across the world.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to companies to be able to stand out in an environment where there's much more noise, there's much more clutter across much more channels than what had existed historically?
So I think when doing cold email, and to Colin's point, it's true. The tools in order to do cold emails and cold outreach have really democratized themselves. The cost of those tools went down a lot as well, meaning that people whom you're trying to reach out to, a lot of other people are trying to reach out to them as well. Yeah. So those people probably get like 10 mails a day. It's a good and a bad thing. So I always tell people, yep, it's bad because it's going to be harder to get their attention, but it's also good because it's a bit easier to stand out. Yep. Because 95% of the people do cold email the wrong way and send kind of very average messaging. And so when you're part of the other 5%, which we're not even yet, right? We're probably in like the top 10%. It's really a very tough skill to master because there's so many things that comes into the play of your outreach campaign. Now you're standing out. And on the flip side of that, so it's a double-edged sword. But on the flip side of that, 100% multi-channel is a must-have.
Yeah.
Right? So what we tend to do at the moment, we use LinkedIn, we use email together, and we also sometimes use WhatsApp and cold calls or cold calls depending on the region, right? Because like Singapore, Australia would be very WhatsApp heavy. Some other countries will not. So multi-channel is very important for sure. It's happening already today, but in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, every business are going to be using AI and automation.
Yeah.
It's already happening, right? So it's a matter of adapting or staying behind. But I always tell my team, the output which you get from the AI is only be as good as the input you gave it. So indeed, if you say, write me a post for LinkedIn for my Monday morning post, it's gonna be a very bad post.
Yeah.
Now if you use Claude Pro, you use what they call projects on the cloud, and you have a PDF that talks about your entire professional life story that has another 50 posts of examples of templates that work well on LinkedIn, another PDF of like the top 40 hooks, another PDF about what your business is about, and you prompt AI to say, here's the piece of content I'm going to write about, here's the inspiration from it, here is my twist on it, please give me a draft, and then you revise that draft, it's going to be an amazing post. Right? But you need to make sure that you give it knowledge, you give it rules, and then you edit the draft that you get from it as well.
And this is the thing, most people don't actually edit, and they don't realize how important it is to actually edit, because it's still not a human. It can do 80% of the work for you, but it's not going to do the entirety of it for you.
Yeah.
The other one that I wanted to ask is, you've worked right across the world, as have I. What would you say are the noticeable differences in the way to do lead generation or marketing or sales in Europe versus in Asia versus in US?
I think Europe and US is very similar. Of course, US would be the most direct approach. I think actually I find that Australian are quite like that as well. Except that when Australians don't like your message, they just tell you to fuck off pretty much.
They actually do, yeah.
Yeah, they're like literally. I've got some pretty cool screenshots. So I think the Australians and the Americans are very direct, and they're very used to just receiving a message about the business inquiries. Europeans as well, they're falling a bit behind, and I think Asia is really last at that, because the way in which we do business in Asia is a lot more relationship-based, meaning offline, having business presentations, touring people's offices, and it's very traditional in that sense. So I think that if you try to do lead gen in Asia, it's harder to do than other markets. India is actually a pretty good market for that. But again, it's a very big market, so you need to really segment your audience and make sure you're really pinpointing all the company that you want to be going after. But yeah, there's clearly a difference. And again, Americans are really used to this type of way of doing business. So you probably get higher reply rates. But at the same time, that also means they get over-solicited as opposed to people in like Singapore and Malaysia and Australia, right? Because it's a much more crowded market.
I completely agree. For me, what I find is the other differences are, in Asia Pacific, there's a couple of the major or the key markets, specifically being Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, if you consider that part of Asia Pacific. A lot of people don't know this, but the biggest deal sizes in the world are actually found in Japan. It's actually not in the US, but selling in Japan is, oh my God. I've never seen anything quite like it. That, I guess for me, it kind of ties into like how ChatGPT has democratized outreach. It's kind of made the ability or the skill set to actually pick up the phone and cold call, or to actually get out to an event and network, even more premium. Like, at the end of the day, meeting people in person is the easiest way of being able to cut through. And because people are just getting absolutely bombarded of content, that just having that skill set of actually just being able to cold call, it's really like people that can do that, it's really, really just amplified their market value. People resonate with authenticity. People resonate with putting yourself out there, about building a personal brand. And it doesn't even matter how many competitors he had. He didn't even have the money, and he was already able to scale the company just by simplicity, personal brand, messaging, content. And that's a closing statement. Anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We've covered a lot of stuff. So I think just very important to nail your messaging, have a really well optimized and set up LinkedIn profile, and then you want to lead with value in whatever you do, whether that being content or outreach. stay relatable, and that'll grow your business, and be consistent, of course.
Yep. Let's make money.
Cool. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you. Oh, where do I even start with that? The power of messaging, simplifying the message, the power of authenticity, the power of not being a massive puss and just picking up the phone and cold calling, but also using a tool like Clay. Clay is an amazing tool, but it genuinely is like rocket science. But then if you're able to master it, the way that it transforms your outreach from understanding exactly what are the pain points of your customer to these are the specific customers that you should be talking to these are the specific pain points, these are the specific people, this is their email, this is the exact message, now let's go and sync into your system. When you've got that running on autopilot, it's pretty much rocket fuel. He's taking what companies that are doing at Series B onwards, but he's applying it to companies that are still in their growth stages. So that's some of my biggest takeaways that I've learned from listening to Thibaut, and it's also the power of personal brand and posting original and unique content, because that's the sort of stuff that cuts through.
Right, and I put two hands up on authenticity. Right now, there's just too many AI-generated stuff.
Oh yeah, so much crap.
Right,
Yep.
and sometimes having that mistake or having something that doesn't look so polished actually helps you stand out massively. I can't wait to apply some of the things that Thibaut has taught to some of my own stuff as well. I think that would be massive. For those of you who are on this call right now, we'd like to invite you to leave your comments and questions. Just click on the Q&A button that's somewhere there, and we'll be addressing them in this session. Right, and I see some questions that we have. What's the biggest mistake you see companies making on their LinkedIn profiles that destroys trust in an APAC context? I think it doesn't necessarily have to be on APAC, but destroys trust, I see lots. Right, Colin, you like to take on this question first?
It's a really, really hard one to answer because I've seen companies not have trust because they don't actually use LinkedIn to begin with. But some of the ones that I've seen that have really backfired is posting on, I guess, quite political or controversial topics. I know that posting something which is somewhat controversial can go viral, but I've seen people when they post on something which is highly political and then that's backfired. I've seen other ones where it's sharing internal memos and communications, and that doesn't work well, especially from an employer branding perspective. But I mean, other than that, obviously if you're posting like racist or offensive content, that's the sort of thing. But in general, most people aren't fucking idiots and know what not to be posting. I think the biggest one is not actually posting and gaining trust to begin with. Like, I'd rather you have this problem than not have the problem at all. And that just comes down to the biggest mistake companies make is not actually having a LinkedIn process to start building trust to begin with.
I completely agree because I was fairly making that kind of mistakes, fearing that I have nothing to tell people. Whatever I want to tell people has been said by others, and just having that fear of not starting. Right, I think that's been holding me back in the past. Right, and these days, you're absolutely right. Just not posting.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, what are some mistakes where people are making even if they're posting? I think not being intentional on the key message that they're posting, and I see this sometimes, and I'm guilty of a few of them, that you post a lot about your beliefs, you post a lot about what your family, you post about a lot of other stuff, but you don't demonstrate expertise in the work you do.
Yep.
And I'm not asking you to ask for a sale, but you do need to demonstrate what you're great at and how you're better than someone else in solving a problem that's out there. And that subtly increases the trust, and that will get you people who want to connect with you. And that will eventually gain you business. So I think one mistake is people posting randomly and not being intentional on a few things that will eventually lend them supporters, people to comment and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think that's one mistake, if I may call it.
Yep. And next question from Lee. So from your experience, what's a common subtle timing mistake that companies make in their APAC outbound campaigns? And what's the impact? I mean, if you're reaching out from Europe or US and you're sending the email at a very obscure time, then you might not get the greatest response. It's not that you won't get a response, it's just you might not get as high of a response rate. But here's a couple like small subtle ones. So for example, in Australia, I find that people genuinely start work earlier than in Singapore. That if you want to be reaching out to people when they're on their daily commute, you almost want to send the message at like 8 a.m. or something like that. Whereas in Singapore, because work starts, I find, later, but people finish later, you're better off actually sending it at like 9 or 9:30. So that's just like a very, very subtle little trick that I've identified. But the other ones are, Mondays don't have the greatest response rates. That's when there's the highest amount of clutter. But surprisingly, posting content on LinkedIn, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But what I've actually found is in terms of outbound campaigns, Fridays are actually a pretty good day because a lot of people are winding down and there's a lot less people emailing on the Friday or trying to do outreach on the Friday, that I find it's actually a lot easier to get through to prospects. That's just assuming that you work on Fridays, because I know not all parts of the world do, but I find that the last day of the week is actually quite powerful just because nobody else is really doing it. The same thing with like cold calling. If you cold call somebody after 6 o'clock, you actually will usually get a pretty decent response rate because a lot of people are actually winding down or finishing work, as opposed to 9 a.m. when everybody else is trying to be prospecting to that person. So I'd say that there's some of the subtle timing mistakes.
And I have actually observed my own response, especially to LinkedIn DMs, right? I actually view the DMs coming to me on Sundays.
Yeah.
Just because probably in a similar vein that you talk about Fridays, that people don't do as often. I do get a few DMs on Sundays occasionally, and they stand out because nobody does it.
Yeah.
And I do a quick reply on my mobile, and the messages are usually short, sharp, and only cover one thing, right? And that is somehow one of the best things that came across for me. And when they deliver value in that message, that's how there is a certain trust being built. And I got irritated by lots of US-based companies sending me messages in the middle of my night.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
And I would just mute it and I ignore it forever. So that's for me from a personal basis. Yeah. So really understand your market and what are, and especially you do have to factor in a little bit of their public holidays, so on and so forth. So you are a little bit more aware. So it makes a small difference, but important difference. Right. So thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of our webinar. So on your screen you see a little poll coming up. Help us make the next event better by giving us your feedback. And if you are interested in what we have shared today, be sure to follow on our socials. I'm sure they'll give you the links below on our upcoming episodes. And I need to stress that our video on demands are up. Please like them, please subscribe. Make sure you click the subscribe button. We're growing our followership. I'm sure whatever content we're putting out there will benefit you greatly. So join us for another exciting episode of Scaling APAC in August. And thank you everyone. See you in the next episode.